how did you get into aviation? Like, what started the bug for you?
Yeah, I guess I'm not going to break the mold here. Allegedly, according to my parents, I watched Top Gun like 5 times a day. Yeah. Um, actually, so my parents were accountants, and we actually lived in Key West for 1 year, and our house got buzzed by tomcats. So that helped. It helps when you're watching the show on the TV and an actual tomcat buzzes your house. So probably a little bit of inspiration there. But I ended up in the Air Force, so we'll get into that eventually. But then I always had poor eyesight, so I just gave myself the misconception that because I had poor eyesight, I can't be a pilot. So even though it was a childhood dream to fly, I wrote myself off. I told myself no right off the bat. And it wasn't until I was out of college, I was working an IT job, and a friend of mine knew that I always liked flying, and he was able to get me connected with a discovery flight on a Cessna.
Oh,
Yep,
yeah.
and I was hooked, and I started. And I realized that okay, well, for an FAA pilot's license, you can have as long as you're correctable to 2020. That's all good. So I thought, okay, well, let me pursue flying on the civilian side. But I still had written off military flying because I just like, nah, military pilots, they have to have eagle eyes, 2020 vision. It's not a chance for me. But yeah, in my mid 20s, working a job, had some time and a little bit of spare funds to pay for like 1 or 2 flight lessons a month. And so I just did the Part 61 route real slowly. Just over the course of a year, I was able to get my private pilot's license.
Awesome.
And I was like, cool, now what? What do I do with this? And so I think I was looking through an AOPA magazine, and I found out about Civil Air Patrol. And now most people who've heard of it, they associate it with their cadet programs. But what caught my eye was that you can join as an adult and you can fly on Air Force assigned missions like search and rescue or disaster relief type missions. And so I thought, oh, cool. Well, I've got this private pilot license, and now I can maybe do something with it. And so that got me into contacting local squadron, and it all went from there. Became a senior member in Civil Air Patrol and a mission pilot, cadet orientation ride pilot, which that was my favorite thing to do in CAP was fly cadets on their very first powered orientation flights or O rides.
Wow.
That was something super cool. I think I flew about 50 or 60 of them.
Wow.
And most of them, that was the first time they've ever been in an airplane. So I'm forever grateful I had that opportunity to be that part of a teenager's experience of flight. And also got to fly on the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, helping with helping
Wow.
FEMA with data collection,
Wow.
how they're doing with putting up the environmental protection measures of stopping the oil slicks from getting to environmentally protected areas. So that was kind of cool to get to be a part of that. But so how did that turn into me actually applying for the Air Force? Well, back then we had really good support from the Air Force with airlift, so getting C-17s, C-130s to take us up, so both CAP cadets and senior members, and fly us to whatever our activities. So in our particular case, it was taking us from Homestead Air Reserve Base up to Charleston, and then the cadets would stay overnight on the USS Yorktown. It was a cool little field trip for them
Oh,
to get to
yeah.
fly up a
That's
C-17.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they load us all. So I was one of the senior member chaperones on the trip, and they loaded us all up, and they let me sit in the jump seat in the cockpit during the flight,
Oh,
and that was the start of the inspiration for me of like, okay, I know I wrote myself off for flying for the military, but I think during that flight, I think that the pilots actually told me, no, as long as you're correctable and you're within the waiverable limits, you can apply. And be a military pilot. And that's where I then found out about waivers and age limits. And so at that time I was starting to push about 27 or 28. So, and they're like, oh yeah, you better hurry. If you want to do this, you better hurry. So I started applying to Guard and Reserve C-17 squadrons because that was the initial inspiration. So I applied to Charleston, Jackson, a few other units, and I heard back from Jackson, Mississippi, and they brought me in for an interview, and then they told me no. So they're
thankfully,
yeah.
God,
thankfully.
don't bully the big airplanes, man.
I'll bully the big airplanes.
In retrospect, I'm kind of grateful they did say no. So yeah.
C5 unit told me no too. So
okay, all right.
They said I didn't have the grades to do, like I didn't have the scores to do well in pilot training. So I actually met that guy at IG school, and he's like, "I did you a favor." I said, "I know." Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So if any of y'all from the 179th are watching, no hard feelings, please. Thank you for
check out the shirt, nerds.
Yeah. I still love you all. And so the Guard or Reserve path was telling me no at that point. So I contacted what's called a line officer recruiter for officer training school, because that was my only viable commissioning path at that age. So too old for the academy or ROTC. And even he, at that time, I was almost 28, and he said, "Hey, man, sorry, you're too old. I'm not going to let you apply." And I guess at this point, I was like, I got this far. Let me just look at the regulations, see where he's getting that from. I think I asked him, where does it say that? And looked it up. And it said, well, if you can start, back then the age limit was 30 years old. And so it said, if you could start officer training school by 29 years old in 1 month, you can go to pilot training. And it just so happens that they had an OTS class that started when I would be 29 years old in 1 month.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Perfect.
I showed that to the recruiter, and thank God he was not like, "How dare you tell me?" Thank God he wasn't. He was very receptive and open to that, and he said, "Let me show this to my supervisor," and the supervisor said, "Yep, go for it." And so he let my application go through, and a few months later, I got the call that I got a pilot slot. So and so everything was going pretty well, and I was like, "All right,
Emma,
cool,
what year was that?
2012, or sorry, that was 2011."
Okay.
Yeah. And
wow.
And then another week or two went by, and they sent me to get a flight class 1 physical, and I was a little bit nervous because I'm like, well, I know I'm correctable to 2020, but I'm still, I still don't have like the world's greatest vision. I'm nearsighted, and so I was a little bit worried about that physical, but I was like, all right, gotten this far, let's just keep on pressing. But then another week or so after that physical came the earth-shattering news. The recruiter called me and he said, yeah, based on the results of your physical, you're disqualified for flight class 1, so you cannot be a pilot. You are medically qualified for the other rated officer positions. So if you want RPA, ABM, or CISO, we can offer you that, but you cannot be a pilot. So after a lot of,
is that ammo? Is that from eyesight? Is that why?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My eyesight was just at that time, it was just outside the waiverable limits, and so they try to appeal it, but they're just, I was just one of thousands and thousands of other people trying to break through in the beginning. So yeah, they basically told me go pound sand. So so after a lot of talking to mentors, prayer, and thinking introspectively about it all, I decided, well, let me still take this opportunity. They've offered me a spot in OTS to commission. Let me go RPAs, because there's a lot of future potential growth in that, and I could probably make a good career out of that. And so I called the recruiter back. I said, all right, let's go with RPAs. And he said, done. And so went to MEPS, did all the entrance requirements, and went to OTS January 2012, and commissioned, and was on the path to becoming an RPA pilot. And for those who are listening that are or want to be RPA pilots, nothing wrong with that. But for those of us here who love flying, there's something about strapping on a flying machine and slipping the surly bonds that, it's just, you get obsessed with it, and it's a passion, and you want to do that at whatever cost. And so
we need to define it. Remote piloted aircraft, remotely piloted. It's drones. It's Predators, UAVs, Reapers, whatever. So it's you're not in the seat. So just for the acronym challenge among us.
Yeah.
Continue.
Cut me off if I get too jargony.
Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I'll try to explain acronyms. Yeah, I'm still guilty of it. I should know better. So you have to go to a follow-up flight screen. They call it medical flight screening over at Wright Pat Air Force Base, and there was an optometrist there who, he took the time to look through my record. He could see that I got disqualified for flight class 1 physical, which, for your listeners, that is the flying class physical that is required to be a pilot. You can get flying class 2 and lower for other occupations, but pilot, you need FC1. He said, "Oh, I see you were disqualified that." And he's like, "Well, based on your optometry examinations here, we might be able to get you a waiver. Do you want to stay an extra day and do some extra tests and go for that?" And so, and you would have thought I would have leaped at it, but that having the heartbreak already several times of being told no, and then it getting a little bit further, getting closer to the dream, and then having it crushed again, there was actually a part of me that was just like, you know what, I've got this RPA job in the bag, let's just not take any risk. Let's just go forward. But I'm thankful that, I knew I had to make a decision right then and there, and I could just feel, I just said a quick prayer to God, and I just felt this peace that was like, look, take that risk, go for it, because if you don't, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. I'm so glad that I said, yep, let's do the extra exams, let's stay behind, let's try to get that waiver, and let's see what we can do to get back into a pilot slot. So, not to drone on here. Sorry, no pun intended.
No, but, dude, don't stop. Yeah. This is amazing. Okay. This is all awesome. This is gold. Yeah, good stuff, continue.
Right. So this ophthalmologist over at Wright Pat, he was able to submit for the waiver, and I actually got the waiver for FC1 for flying class 1. So now I was medically qualified to be a pilot, but now a new problem was in the way. I had already moved to Randolph Air Force Base, which is where the training pipeline for drone pilots starts. And I was a couple weeks from starting my drone pilot training course. And so when I got the waiver, I asked the optometrist who made this happen. I'm like, okay, yeah, so how do I get back into the pilot training pipeline? He's like, well, I can help you with the medical side, but I can't really help you with moving your AFSC, your actual job, from drone pilot trainee to pilot trainee. So I had another uphill battle here. And back then, in that time frame, the RPA pipeline was critically undermanned. And so imagine me, the FNG walking into the squadron commander's office and saying, "Hey, boss, do you mind if I drop out of your squadron and try to go back to pilot training?" And so you can imagine I was a little bit apprehensive about doing this. But again, I've gotten this far. Again, I told myself no growing up this whole time, and now I need to just make everyone tell me no at this point. And if that squadron commander was going to be the end of the road, then I knew, at least in my conscience, that I had done everything to exhaust every single possibility to get that pilot slot and to get the pilot training. So with that, I tried to work up whatever courage I could, walked into his office, and thankfully, this squadron commander was a former F-15 and F-117 pilot, and he completely understood where I was coming from when I said, it's been my dream to be a pilot, and the circumstances brought me here, but now I've got a chance to go back. And so he was 100% on board with fighting for me, advocating for me, and which I was floored by. And so he was going to reach out to Air Force Personnel Center, which manages those types of changes in your job. So about a week later, he gets back to me and he's like, "Hey, I've got some bad news, man. I reached out and yeah, they said not possible. Can't move from the RPA pipeline over to pilot training. It's critically undermanned right now, and it's just they're just not going to allow it at this point. I'm sorry, I don't know where else to go to help you." And so again, I'm feeling dejected and just that heartbreak again of like, hey, it's the end of the road, and just kind of out of desperation, I said, "Well, sir, is this something that, if I make some phone calls and try to like reach out to some contacts of mine, are you okay with me just kind of owning this and taking this on myself?" He's like, "Hey man, go for it. I've got your back." So I was grateful for that support. I actually called the commander of the recruiting squadron who gave me my OTS interview, and he was a pilot, and I just said, "Hey, so the reason why I called him is because he was aware of this whole path that I was on of getting turned down for pilot initially, and then when I told him I had the waiver, he said, "Hey, keep me posted. Let me know how I can help." So I was like, "Okay, this might be my last resort." So I called him up, and he actually happened to know some contacts at AFPC who manage the pilot training pipeline and manage who goes into that. And so he gave me some advice. He's like, "Look, you had a pilot slot. They told you were medically disqualified, and now you're medically qualified. So you have a case here where you can submit a package to the Board of Correction for Military Records," which, for those listening, that's a pretty serious process where you submit paperwork to Washington and they review it and they can overturn and change a lot of things. So he said, "Get that process started. In the meantime, let me reach out to some contacts over at AFPC." And again, I won't belabor all the details, but I kid you not, about 2 weeks later, I was sitting at the desk of the person who assigns the bodies to go to pilot training. And I pleaded my case. I showed the paperwork for the BCMR process that I was about to submit. And he said, just wait 2 or 3 days before you submit that BCMR package. And if you don't hear from me, send it in and we'll go from there. And no kidding, about 2 days later, email came through, and it was what we call a RIP. It's a document that shows a reassignment, and I was going to Laughlin Air Force Base for pilot training. And so that's
awesome. That's awesome, man.
Call it a miracle from God, or
yeah.
I can't explain it, but the impossible happened, and I was able to go to pilot training. So when I walk into a squadron and I say happy to be here, I mean it. So and so that's how I ended up in the Air Force in pilot training. And so I'll pause if you got any questions or any commentary.
I mean,
that's wild.
You obviously had to do really well in pilot training because you got a fighter slot.
Yeah. So I said I wanted to be in C-17s, and I meant that at the beginning. And I was airsick. I was puking my guts out in T-6s, and
really,
I was like, yep. Yeah, I think flying heavies is what I'm meant for. So, but then my flight commander at UPT, he sent me to the Barony chair, and this is a modern day torture device that the Air Force uses. to basically convert your body from feeling air sickness to not feeling it at all through days and days of torture. And it was basically, think of an office chair. For those who don't know what it is, it's like an office chair that they just spin you around and around and around again. And if you're projectile vomiting the whole time, they don't stop. They just keep going until your inner ear and your brain finally say, this is enough. No more. All right, we're going to just ignore this feeling. And it worked. It cured me. And I actually started liking going upside down and flying formation and doing all of those things that fighters do. To be fair, C-17s and C-130s, they do a lot of that stuff too, but just not as fast and not as close.
Yeah, not on purpose.
Yeah, and not so
either of those aircraft.
Yeah.
Things are going well.
All my heavy driver friends out there, I love you. So, so
except for the nerds that didn't hire you.
Yeah.
I love them too. Love them too. And so when it came to the track selection of do I go T-38s or T-1s, I was like, well, all right, well, you miss 100% of the shots you don't try. Well, here's an opportunity. So there was one time in 2008, so 4 years prior to pilot training, I went to Sun and Fun in Lakeland, and I saw an F-22 demo, and that it was just like watching an alien spaceship defy physics, and I was so floored by seeing that jet. And I remember like kind of murmuring to myself of like, well, I'm never going to get to fly a fighter, but if I ever could, I would love to fly that. And so now I realized I'm actually at a moment where I actually have a thin chance at actually flying the Raptor. And so I thought, all right, let me just put in for T-38s for the track select. And so you said, did I do well at pilot training? Well, I did enough to get there were 5 T-38 slots, and I got the number 5 slot. So
that's all you need.
Perfect.
Dumb luck and timing. You know, at that point in time, there were 5, and I got the 5th one. So, and I was so like, not confused. I was just so like dumbfounded that I'm now over at the T-38 squadron. In fact, day 1, I was there. The squadron commander came and briefed us. Welcome to the squadron. And like, I was just so shocked that I was there. The squadron commander actually like looked at me. He's like, "Do you even want to be here?" And I'm like, "No, yes, of course." He's like, "No." Like, he just didn't understand. Just the look on my face was like, I just can't believe I've made it here. And after all of these no's, all of these roadblocks, hurdles, and brick walls, now I'm sitting here about to fly the T-38, and so did well enough to be the number 2 guy of the 5 when all was said and done. And but there was only one F-22 slot available for the entire pilot training class, and so then that went to a guy at a different pilot training base. And but they had just started this new program called ADAIR, Adversary Air, and they're letting lieutenants out of pilot training get assigned to these ragtag adversary squadrons flying MiG-28s,
70-year-old jets.
Yep. And
with 70-year-old men.
Someone claimed that I'm pushing that now because having joined OTS when I was pushing 30, but and so they claimed that if you went this route, the ADAIR route, that you have a chance at getting into the Raptor. And so I put that as my number 2 choice, and I got it. And I was assigned to Tyndall, to the Tufus, and ended up there. And before it was the Tufus, it was just the an offshoot of the 325th TRIDS.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even its own squadron.
Emil,
So,
how long were you at Tyndall?
From January 2014 to September of 2015.
Okay.
That's a quick.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, as the first adversary lieutenant, how big of a culture shock was that? Because you go from IFF, where they don't teach you any of the stuff that we do, and you're in these large force exercises with no data link, no radar, no situational, no HUD,
With
no
skid.
HUD, an old seat.
With skid.
With skid leading you.
Go out
being
with
led
skid.
around by skid.
Yeah, skid who has 2 power settings, full afterburner and idle, and there's no in between.
And he's letting those all the time.
Yeah, you may or may not bingo out before you get there. But just talk about that. Like, how was that? You know, you're thinking, hey, I'm going to go to the F-22, but you just put me in you could not get farther away from the F-22 in terms of performance and age of the aircraft.
100%. And then when you say culture shock, yeah, you're going to this squadron where you're one of like 2 lieutenants, maybe 1 captain, and everyone else is lieutenant colonels and majors that are nearing the sunset of their careers. I love that photo, by the way. That's actually that's Skid and I are in the jet on the top left.
Oh.
And Bud, our squadron commander, is leading us there, and that was a photo op we did with Mr. John Dibbs. Nice. Sorry, Mr. Dibbs, if I didn't notify you that we were going to use this on this channel here, please don't fry us for copyright.
All credit.
We love your work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was back then. That squadron was kind of just off the radar. So, I mean, it was the Wild West. These crusty lieutenant colonels near the end of their careers, they just made sure we were safe enough to not die. So sanctuary altitudes were king or were paramount to make sure we don't smack into another jet. And yeah, they're C2 helping us out with point outs, but yeah, no ADS-B, no radar, nothing. So yeah, we were as low SA as it gets there, and that was tough.
When you were there, lieutenants just stayed as wingmen, right?
No, they put them all the way through IPUG.
Oh, really?
Okay.
So
yeah.
You went through all that stuff?
So I was just starting FLUG, flight lead upgrade, when I got the call that they had an opening at the Raptor B course, basic course, and they needed to fill that opening. And that's exactly why they let lieutenants go to the Adair squadron, is to kind of have a bullpen to backfill any unexpected vacancies and eventually flow them over to some type of fighter platform after doing 2 to 3 years as Adair. So after only 1 year, I was able to go into the Raptor B course.
Yeah, so you just walked across the street. I mean, you were already literally those dudes. Yeah.
Yeah. And wow. most of those instructors I'd already flown with on the Adair side. So if it wasn't for that Adair program, I don't know if I even would have passed the Raptor B course, because like you said, you're exposed to the brief, debrief. You're allowed to watch the tapes because you're read in on enough of the stuff, and you just gain a sense of familiarity with the whole process and with tactics and techniques and procedures that going straight into it from IFF. For me and my ancient brain, it might have been too much of a fire hose. So I'm very thankful for the Adair program that I was able to kind of get a taster of it all before going over to the Raptor.